The issue of chemicals in the environment is a story about science, politics, and humanity's relationship with the planet. My name is Chris Hughes, independent scientist, and this is the Chemical Journeys podcast. Join me as we uncover the story of chemicals in the environment through conversations with individuals working in this space. So, let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Chemical Journeys podcast. Doing something a little bit different today in that it's just me, and I'm going to be talking to you about environmental persistence. First of all, I really hope that you're doing well and that you're enjoying this podcast, that you're liking the guests and the conversations that I'm having. I'll be really interested to hear what you think about the podcast, or if there's somebody you think would be really good for me to have as a guest, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to hear your feedback. You can contact me on chris@embarkchemical.com. This week, I'm going to read another of my articles from the Embark Chemical website. This one is on the topic of environmental persistence, which is a favourite topic of mine, and it's linked to a lot of the work that I do for clients. In recent years, with the global sustainability agenda and key environmental challenges around PFAS and plastic pollution, the issue of environmental persistence is becoming more and more important. And here I'm going to tell you about what environmental persistence is and why this should be a top priority for organizations thinking about safe and sustainable products. Producers of chemical products have a long list of issues to worry about. Beyond developing and marketing products that are effective, competitive, and meet societal needs, there are matters of the safety of the product for both human health and the environment, and increasingly, the sustainability of the product. However, one cross-cutting issue is fast becoming a top priority for companies: environmental persistence. Persistence concerns the extent to which chemicals will break down in the environment after their use. Chemicals that are persistent are slower to degrade and can build up to higher concentrations, potentially posing greater risks to people and the environment. Persistence is therefore a crucial property for both the safety and sustainability of chemical products. Here are 4 reasons why the issue of persistence has become more relevant today and why companies need to act now to address it. First of all, the new hazard classification requirements under the EU CLP regulation. The EU CLP regulation, that's the Classification, Labelling and Packaging regulation, has recently been updated to include new hazard classes. Among these are 4 new hazard classes where persistence is a key element. You have PBT and VPVB, that's for persistent, bioaccumulative and toxic or very persistent and very bioaccumulative substances, or PMT and VPVM, which is for persistent, mobile and toxic or very persistent, very mobile substances. The introduction of the PMT-VPVM hazards in particular has huge implications. This is a relatively new regulatory concept related to concerns for more polar chemicals to be transported in the environment and get into drinking water. It brings a huge swathe of new chemicals into scope for detailed persistence assessments, which are likely to not have been scrutinized before. Few people realize that with the introduction of the mobility criteria, the importance of persistence has been significantly elevated. This is because substances which are not bioaccumulative are generally more likely to be mobile and vice versa. This means that it's critically important to get the persistence assessments of your product ingredients right. The nuances of CLP also mean that substances not previously looked at under other legislation now come into scope for assessment, such as polymers and low-tonnage substances. These changes are likely to turn on considerable work for producers of chemical products. In terms of timelines, all substances on the market will need to comply with the requirements by November 2026. This really isn't much time when considering how many substances will need to be evaluated and the complexity of these assessments. For producers of formulated products, the compliance deadline of May 2026 for new products means they may even be caught in the strange situation where they need to classify their new product before all of the raw materials have been assessed by their suppliers. In any case, formulators should be getting to work now to understand the implications of these changes for the classification and the subsequent market implications of their products. The second point is big increases in biodegradation testing under REACH. With the increasing attention on persistence, regulators have been taking a closer look at data in registration dossiers. We've seen a huge increase in the number of biodegradation simulation tests being requested by the European Chemicals Agency as part of EU REACH dossier evaluation decisions in recent years. ECHA has also issued clarifications on when simulation testing should be performed, stressing that these are part of REACH standard information requirements and tightening the conditions under which testing can be waived. This is important because at the moment, very few substances registered under REACH have biodegradation simulation tests available, and many dossiers present arguments to waive these studies that would not be acceptable based on the current guidance. We should therefore expect this increasing trend in regulatory requests for simulation testing to continue. The third point is that customers are increasingly expecting biodegradability as the norm. It's understandable that nobody wants to feel responsible for causing pollution. People have an implicit awareness when it comes to their own actions. However, until recently, the emissions of chemicals from the products we use in daily life has not been given as much scrutiny. The growing interest here has been catalysed in particular by the issue of plastic pollution, which presented us all with a very salient comparison between the polystyrene single-use cup and the polyethylene microbead in your shower gel. Both of these uses are now banned in the EU. However, the wider impacts on attitudes and expectations on biodegradability of chemicals are only just beginning. In consumer-facing sectors, product biodegradability has been an issue of concern and a potential market differentiator for some time. We're seeing an increasing focus on this in product innovation and marketing, especially in consumer-facing sectors. The most notable instance of this was the flagship announcement by Unilever in 2021 to make all their product formulations biodegradable by 2030. We also see this as a key focus area of the newly established organisation, the International Collaboration on Cosmetic Safety, or ICCS. These activities are likely to send ripples throughout supply chains and get many more companies talking about biodegradability in the future. One particular category of chemicals that's getting more attention these days is polymers. In addition to microplastic particles, many polymers are used in liquid formulations across a huge range of applications, with an estimated $125 million value and 36 million tons produced every year. This has led to questions around the biodegradability of these materials, and new research initiatives, such as by the Royal Society of Chemistry, the European Chemical Industry Council, or CEFIC, and the cleaning and cosmetic sectors. Meanwhile, on the subject of product differentiation, it's worth mentioning that product biodegradability claims may also be heading into some challenges in the future, with new laws passed in California and France that place limits on when these claims can be made. These appear to be part of the general backlash against greenwashing, in particular with bogus claims related to product packaging. It will be interesting to see how these issues develop and whether this more broadly impacts biodegradability claims on formulated products in the future. The fourth issue I want to highlight, a final and crucial point, is that these assessments are far from straightforward. They require a lot of information to be considered together in a process known as weight of evidence. The tests themselves are highly complex and prone to varying and unpredictable results. Also, certain substance types, such as volatile chemicals and substances with complex compositions, known as UVCBs, are extremely difficult to work with and assess. All these issues combine to make persistence assessments very challenging. Simulation tests can cost anywhere up to €500,000 per test, and their results can have far-reaching implications for the subsequent regulation of substances. Testing therefore needs to be carefully planned and closely monitored to ensure that experiments take the specific physical and chemical properties of the substance into account, that the results are reliable, and that the risk of false positives is mitigated as much as possible. If you're planning on undertaking a persistence assessment, you should also take a look at the Persistence Assessment Tool, which is designed to support with these challenging assessments. I work with colleagues at Ricardo to develop the Persistence Assessment Tool as part of a project sponsored by Konkawi and the ICCS and supported by CEFIC LRI and ESSATOC. The tool is freely available to download and will guide you to compile and evaluate relevant information and arrive at robust conclusions following a transparent weight of evidence methodology. I would also recommend that, as well as considering the relevant ECHA guidance, you take a look at the reports that were developed as part of the CEVIC LRI Eco52 project, which address many challenges related to persistence assessments, including difficult test substances, complex substances, polymers, and weight of evidence. So, to sum up, it's clear to see that a lot is happening around the environmental persistence of chemicals. As well as being of critical importance for chemical safety, persistence is, more than any other property, intrinsically linked to sustainability because it concerns the degree to which we're able to alter and degrade the natural environment through human activities. Regulatory developments and shifts in public attitudes on this topic are evolving at a rapid pace, and it's inevitable that chemical manufacturers, producers of formulated products, and brands will be increasingly affected. Persistence should therefore be rapidly rising up the list of priority issues that companies need to address. And that concludes the article, which I actually wrote in June of 2024. And since then, there have also been some notable recent developments. So first of all, in October of last year, we had the release of ECHA's new guidance for addressing the new hazard classes under CLP. A couple of things that are worth knowing around that are that this was the first example of the regulatory guidance for mobility being announced. So we now have formal guidance for understanding how mobility of chemicals will be assessed. So there'll be a lot of work to come in terms of investigating the properties of substances and applying that guidance to arrive at regulatory acceptable conclusions on mobility, on that M property. Another thing that's notable is that the persistence assessment tool, which I mentioned in this article, is also included within the guidance. So I'm extremely pleased that the value of that tool is being recognized to support organizations and individuals to carry out these kinds of assessments. Another recent development was that towards the end of last year, we held a CTAC topical discussion on extreme persistence. So this was a session that was organized by myself, along with several other scientists from industry, academia, and regulatory bodies. And we had a panel discussion that was designed to discuss the topic of extreme persistence. In that panel discussion, we explored whether the extreme persistence of substances like PFAS and microplastics showed that these substances with very, very long half-lives in the environment warranted distinct attention, which rendered them different to other chemicals which may be closer to the more traditional persistent and very persistent criteria. So if you're interested in finding out about that topic, I'll put a link to that in the show notes and you can take a listen. Another issue or another recent development was that there was a workshop held in January hosted by ESSATOC on the OECD 309 test guideline. This is a biodegradation simulation test guideline similar to the ones that I mentioned earlier. It's actually the preferred test guideline of the European Chemicals Agency for carrying out persistence assessments. And recently, based on a lot of research that's been happening around this guideline, the guideline's actually been added to the OECD working program for revision. And there have also been some very important publications which have highlighted concerns around the robustness and reproducibility of that guideline. We had some really good discussions on this topic in Brussels, and I'll be working on writing up that report along with others to share what was discussed and where things could go from here concerning the OECD 309 test guideline. So look out for that one as well. Last but not least, I'll just mention that, again, the CTAC Europe conference is coming around in May this year. It's going to be in Vienna this year, and there are going to be a lot of biodegradation and persistence-related activities there. There are some great sessions, including one that I'm chairing with representatives from ECHA and industry and academia. We're also having a meeting for our membership of the Persistence Science Interest Group. So a lot is happening in that space to continue to move forward on the topic of environmental persistence. And I'm really excited about that. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast today. If you're interested in discussing this topic, or if you have questions or any thoughts, I really welcome you to reach out. So feel free to contact me on chris@embarkchemical.com. thank you for listening. Your time's really precious, so I'm grateful that you've spent it with me today. And I'll just say, tune in next time for more discussions on the story of chemicals in the environment on the Chemical Journeys podcast. So thank you very much and take care, and I'll see you soon.